Today we're going to see if this $2 skein of yarn is worth it or if it was at the dollar store for a reason. If you're new here, hi, my name is Eli and welcome to my channel. When I was at the dollar store last, I saw a bunch of skeins of this jersey knit material for $2 each, so I thought I would pick out a bunch of them and try them out and see how well they actually stand up. So the first thing to go over with this is the materials, the price, and the weight. So as I mentioned, it is $2 a skein and you get 200 grams. It does not have a yardage on it though. So 200 grams could be a lot or it might not be much based on how thick the actual yarn is. It also doesn't have a yarn weight on it, so we don't know if it's a weight 4, a weight 6, or something in between. But it does recommend using a hook size 4.5 to a 6. For the materials in this one, it's 90% cotton and 10% polyester. And it says that it's machine washable, which is great. So let's open it up and see how the texture is. So it is a very soft material. It's very smooth, like a stretchy t-shirt, and it is very stretchy. So as you can see, it is just small slices, basically just like small slices from a shirt. And when it's stretched, it rolls up into like a little line like that. And then you can crochet with it just like a regular thread. So I bought 4 of these to see how well they would work on testing out my basket pattern, which is a very simple design. It's just double crochets on the base and then half double crochets all around the sides. So I already worked up a project using 3 skeins of it because I wanted to get a good idea of how each skein compares to each other, if the thickness is similar, how the colors are, and just how easy it is to work with each one. So this is the project that I've been working on, and something might stick out to you right away, which is the difference between this section and this section. If you can see, this top section is only 3 rows and it is significantly thicker than the rest of it. So what happened is the first 2 skeins that I used were a fairly thin one, very similar to like a weight 4, maybe a weight 5, and I could comfortably use a 5mm when working with it. But once I opened up the 3rd skein, it was significantly thicker and it was basically double the thickness of the other 2. So this is the thickness of the 3rd skein that I had worked on. When you stretch it out, you can see it's a fairly wide piece and it is very thick. So it's very noticeable in the piece. Down here is what we were working with for the first 2 skeins, and up here is the 3rd skein. Since this yarn was so much thicker than the rest of it, it didn't last nearly as long as the first 2 skeins did. So the base of it here and the first almost 10 rows was all made using only 2 skeins, but the last 3 rows was all that lasted for the 3rd skein. My initial feeling when using this is that it was very soft on my hands and it didn't hurt them at all. Typically when working with cotton yarn, it hurts my hands a lot and I'm not able to hold it with a tight tension like you need. But because this one is 10% polyester, it's very stretchy and very soft, which I love. So it worked up very fast, very easy, and it made a really sturdy base to this basket. And for the first few rounds, it was working great for the sides. So again, this is just a simple half double crochet basket. But once I opened up that 3rd skein, you can see how different it looked right away. So that is the first main issue with it, was the difference in thickness per skein. They were not similar at all. They were not consistent between skeins. And opening up this 4th skein, it feels very similar to the 3rd one that I used, like thickness wise. When it comes to the quality of yarn, there definitely were some factory knots through each one. I found probably 2 or 3 per skein, which is a bit more than you would find in a normal one, for this size especially, but not that unexpected. It's pretty normal to get factory knots. What I found for a couple of the skeins is that the thickness throughout the individual skein also varied pretty significantly, where some pieces would be very, very thin and look almost like they had a hole in it, and other sections were very thick. I did have one skein too where in the middle of it there was a big white section, so I did have to cut off a section of the yarn. For example, this is what one of the pieces looked like, where it was black throughout it and then all of a sudden it had no color or it was really faded, and it looks like the dye was not even throughout the whole yarn. This section, you can also see what I mean with the difference in thickness, where it's fully ripped there. We start out very thick, it gets very small, then there's a factory knot, another rip, and then back to the regular yarn. So when it comes to using it, using a 5mm for the smaller skeins worked fine, didn't hurt my hands at all. But then once I moved on to the thicker skeins, the 5mm was definitely too small, and a 6mm would have been much better. So based on that, it does make sense why there was a range of hook size using a 4.5 to a 6, because a 5 worked for the smaller one and a 6 worked for the bigger one. But typically when you're buying yarn, you expect that all of the skeins will be the same thickness unless it's specified differently. One other thing I noticed about it is that the color was a bit different in each skein. So it's a bit of a darker black here and a bit of a lighter one using the thicker yarn, but that is to be expected as different color batches are going to have slightly different shades. So that's kind of expected. Overall, I would rate this yarn a 4 out of 10. I think it's okay for what you paid for and you kind of get what you expect. $2 for a skein is not that much, and it's from the dollar store, so you're not expecting to get a really good quality yarn. However, having such a massive difference between the thickness in skeins is definitely a problem, and I will not be purchasing it again. But it was definitely good to test it out and see how well it works. With my project, what I'm going to end up doing is taking out all of the thicker yarn and then making a smaller basket using the thinner yarn. Then I'll have 2 skeins using a slightly thicker one, and I'll make a separate basket of just thicker yarn. I think that if I was able to open it and test the thickness of each skein first, then that might be okay because I could figure out which ones I want to work with. But of course you can't open things in the store, they are fully sealed, and just looking at it through the plastic, you can't really tell how thick or how thin it is. So I spent a total of $8 of yarn, and I'll end up making 2 small baskets, which is pretty good. However, these are not ones that I'm going to be selling because it's not good enough quality to actually sell, but I think it'll work good for storing just some of my scrap yarn on all of my yarn shelves. So based on my review, let me know in the comments if you would consider buying any dollar store yarn, or if you had a different experience using similar yarn or different dollar store yarn in general. If you guys watch this video, thank you so much for watching and supporting my channel. Don't forget to subscribe because I do post new videos at least once a week and sometimes twice. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next week.